This week on the Hollywood in Toto podcast, we share Hollywood's nastiest attack on Trump yet, and that's saying something. We dip into Hit's YouTube page for a review of Screams Before Silence. It's a documentary critics are too afraid to watch, or is there another reason? And we share a killer response to AMC putting a trigger warning on the great Scorsese movie Goodfellas.
Welcome to the Hollywood in Toto podcast. Entertainment news and reviews without the woke Hollywood narrative. Free speech, free expression. Now that's entertainment. And here's your host, award-winning film critic, Christian Toto.
Before we start, I'd love it if you subscribe to the Hollywood in Toto podcast. We've got new episodes each Wednesday, and the show is going video. You'll find us on Rumble and YouTube. But don't worry, if you're enjoying the show, you'll keep on enjoying it as an audio presentation. You'll also find it in video form as well, coming very soon. Well, we finally got our first look at The Apprentice. I'm not talking about the NBC reality show starring you-know-who. We've all seen that. It's the new biopic about you-know-who. We haven't all seen that, but film critics at the Cannes Film Festival have. It screened just a couple days ago. It stars Sebastian Stan, good actor. He's playing the 80s-era Trump. Handsome, young, he's still got that crazy hair. And the story shows how about his relationship with his lawyer, confidant, mentor, Roy Cohn. Not a good character by any stretch of the imagination, for sure. But the biggest scene in the new film, which they're talking about, sorry for the spoiler, but it's got to be shared, finds Trump raping his wife, Ivana Trump. Really? Now, did that rape actually happen? Well, we weren't there. But both people in the room say, no, it didn't. Of course, Trump's going to deny it, but so did Ivana, Trump's ex-wife. Now, Ivana Trump died in 2022, but around 2015 or so, she responded to a media report claiming that she said that he raped her during their marriage. She said, at the time, never happened. And she added, you know what? I think Donald would make a great president. Remember that whole believe all women mantra we heard after the Me Too movement exploded? Hollywood stars embraced it again and again. Believe all women. Believe all women. And then when Tara Reid came along and she credibly accused Joe Biden of sexually assaulting her in the 90s, well, it became believe some women, not all women. Naturally, Hollywood can't believe Ivana Trump. They've got a narrative they want to push. They've got an election they want to overturn. And the team behind the film doesn't really care about what she said, what she thought, what she wanted to share with the public. Not even a dead woman's word on the matter matters. Donald Trump is lawyering up as we speak against the project. And my first impression of that was, well, that's probably the wrong approach. Remember the Streisand effect? The more attention he puts on it, the more people will want to see it. But you know what? It's not me being accused of rape. It's Donald Trump. I guess I can't blame him. Here's your movie trivia question of the week. Well, we're getting a new Mad Max movie, Furiosa, a Mad Max saga is the official title. And made me think about The Road Warrior, one of my favorite action films. And of course, Mel Gibson was so good in that film. He was a strong silent type. He didn't say much. So I went over to imdb.com and checked out how much he spoke in the movie. And the site says he had about 16 lines of dialogue in the whole film. And one line he repeated twice. What did he say? What was that line? Well, here's a little hint. It's what everyone's chasing in the movie. The answer? At the end of the show. Some films are almost impossible to forget, and that's how I felt after I watched Screams Before Silence. It's a new documentary. It covers the survivors of the October 7th Hamas attacks on Israel, lets them share their stories, and their stories are harrowing. Words fail. It's just an unbelievable experience to hear what they went through. The focus of the film, beyond the obvious, is the unrelenting sexual abuse, the rape and the torture of women during that whole melee. And that's why I want to share my YouTube review of that film here in the podcast. Listen, you may watch the show, the clip, you may listen to the show. Sometimes you need some overlap there. Plus, Selfishly, I just want more people to see this movie, which, by the way, is available for free on YouTube and at screamsbeforesilence.com. Come on, fellow critics, you've got no excuse not to see this movie and review it. Of course, it's also a way to let you know about my YouTube channel. It is blossoming as we speak. More and more videos are coming our way soon. But, one of the reasons why I wanted to create a YouTube channel is because I want to share content you're not going to find anywhere else. Just a quick example, the last time I checked a few days ago, I saw only 3 critics' reviews of Screams Before Silence, and mine was one of them. 3 critics for a major film that's available for free. It is shocking. But that's how the media works today. Some stories can't be told, can't be shared, can't be covered. They don't fit the progressive narrative, so they don't exist. And that's why I've got this podcast, and of course now I've got the YouTube channel. I'm going to keep writing stories and sharing stories that are out there, that are important, that matter, that are being ignored by the media, both here and on the Hollywood and Toto YouTube channel. Check them both out. What I want to say to journalists these days, well, not for a family-friendly show like this. I'm sorry, I am holding my tongue.
I admit, I wasn't looking forward to watching Screams Before Silence. How could you anticipate a movie like this? Of course, this is the documentary by Sheryl Sandberg, the former Facebook CEO, about the atrocities of October 7th. What she did was she traveled to Israel and she interviewed the survivors of all these different attacks at the music festival, just in various places around Israel. And she got them to tell their stories. And their stories are nothing short of horrifying. It's the kind of film and the kind of project where when you say words fail, it seems like a kind of a cute or cloying way to describe something, but really words fail. In fact, one of the people who experienced the atrocities, she said that it was about redefining evil. And I thought that was maybe the most accurate thing to be said about this film. What happened on October 7th was redefining evil. And what this movie does is showcase that evil.
When the body of the woman is violated, it symbolizes the body of the whole nation.
His name was Muhammad. He used to sit on the bed in front of me. I knew that something bad is gonna happen.
And before you think, oh my gosh, must be excruciating to watch, the gore, the carnage, no, those images are blurred. This is not that kind of presentation. But what we're seeing here is something more profound. We're hearing the testimony, and to hear it described, we can all paint those pictures in our minds. It's almost more powerful and more shocking. Now, this is a project that is available now for free, or you can go to screamsbeforesilence.com. No ticket price. This is not a capitalistic endeavor. This is a testament to the people who suffered the most unbelievable atrocities that day, that we don't forget, that we can't forget. And I think on that stage alone, this is a wildly successful project. But of course, it's much more than that. Watching Hollywood after October 7th has been fascinating, frustrating, illuminating at times as well. And, there have been some stars who have been very outspoken from the start, including Patricia Heaton, Michael Rappaport, and others like John Cusack. Well, words fail again, because what is his one-note condemnation of Israel and his support for the Palestinian cause is so mechanical and so thuggish at times. It defies description. And I know his career is not what it used to be, and it's not as white hot as back in the 80s and 90s, but I can't imagine being a Jewish actor or actress showing up on the set and saying, oh, there's John Cusack. Imagine that. Must be awkward, to say the very least. But back to the documentary. One of the things that's so powerful about this movie is that the people are able to speak of what they saw, of what they experienced, of what they suffered. And there's one person in the documentary in particular who said that she worked, or is working possibly, in the morgue. She's dealing with the body bags. And she said, it's my duty, it's my responsibility to to be stoic, to be calm, because once I let my emotions get the better of me, then I can no longer speak, certainly not on camera. Sheryl Sandberg, who is the driving force behind this movie, is almost like the every woman. She's there on screen. She's consoling some of the people as they share their shocking stories. And it's almost like she is our conduit. She is us. She is our representative, where we can watch this movie and think, that's what I would be doing. That's what I would be saying. That's how I would treat the people who are sharing these unimaginable stories. I'd be hugging them. I'd be holding them. I'd be putting my hands on their shoulders, because how else could you respond? It's a very human reaction. And I think her approach is smart, because I don't think you need a clinical journalistic point of view in this regard from an inquisitor like this. You need someone who is human and who understands, at least can scrape the surface of what happened that day. One of the things that's interesting is that Sandberg gives herself a close-up at one point in the film, and she kind of processes what she's been through, why this is important to her. And it felt a little tacky is too strong a word, but not appropriate. Let's just put it that way. But I also think that, she made this happen. She went to Israel. She interviewed these people. She coaxed these stories out of them. So I'm certainly in a forgiving mood for a cinematic mistake or a cinematic misstep, because the rest of the film is so powerful. It's hard to ask yourself why this movie is free. Was there any attempt to make a theatrical release out of this? It's possible she just wanted as many people as possible to see it, and that is certainly noble. But I do wonder, just given what's going on in Hollywood, is anyone vying for this movie? Was there pressure not to put this movie out? Those are legitimate questions. We'll have to find out more as time marches on. We'll also have to see if other documentary filmmakers are able to step up and share these stories, because they need to be shared, and not just in one format, but across TV docuseries, feature films, streaming platforms. This has to get out there. Obviously, I've really kind of buried the lead here, because the story really is about sexual violence against women. It is horrifying, story after story. It is just hard to process and hard to believe that people had to endure what they did endure. And, part of the visual presentation is from Hamas. They were recording much of their atrocities. They were filming. They seemed to be either proud of it or they wanted to share it with the world. And so we get a glimpse of what's happening. We get a glimpse of festival goers at that music event running for their lives. We see a woman being dragged on a motorcycle. We see people being pushed into cars. It's indescribable. It truly is. The movie is only an hour long, and I think that's a very wise choice. I don't know how much more you could watch of this. But at the end of the day, you get the story, you get the idea, you understand what's going on. Another part of the film, which was powerful but almost unnecessary, we see some of the Hamas terrorists being interviewed. I guess a few were captured along the way, and they were describing some of their actions. And it's the least satisfying part of the movie. They certainly don't come across as monsters per se. They seem confused, addled even. They're almost trying to defend some of their actions. But it doesn't really add up to anything as a storytelling device. And I almost think it should have been left aside. Another really powerful part of this presentation is what it leaves out. This is not about the Israel-Palestinian divide. It is not about their intractable conflict. It is not about what's happening right now in Gaza. It is focused on this event. And I think that's a smart approach, because it is so consequential, and it's unlike anything we've seen in the modern world. And you have to go back to the Nazi era. And I almost think what the Nazis did, as inhumane as it is, I don't know if it can compare to what we're seeing here. Obviously, it was a much greater scale. 6 million people died as opposed to 1,200 here. But the way that the terrorists treated the Jewish people, old, young, women in particular, it's hard to imagine a more reprehensible act, collectively speaking. Another part of the film, which I think is really important, is that there are men here speaking, people who are working security, and just to have their input as well, because their pain is so palpable. Obviously the women suffered directly, but you get the sense that these men would have done anything to stop what was happening, the rapes, the torture. And then there are the smaller details, which are unimaginable. Body parts being cut off and discarded. Again, this is very, just to repeat what's shared here is upsetting, but it has to be shared. It has to be said. It has to be captured. It has to be documented for future generations. I know that Steven Spielberg has been mostly quiet about the October 7th attacks, at least initially. And then he finally spoke out and said he's going to be working on getting the testimonies of the people who survived that horrible day. And he's going to use them, again, as an educational tool to kind of capture what happened, to make sure we don't forget. But I think the whole never forget, that whole motif just seems almost comical right now. We see what's happening on college campuses across the world. We see how so many stars have ignored not only October 7th, but the hostages who are still being held by Hamas. Michael Rappaport, the actor, has been just nonstop and very critical of his fellow stars, saying, where are you? Why haven't you used your clout, your voice, your platforms to demand their release? And he's absolutely right. It is shocking that we went through an entire award season, the Oscars and the Golden Globes and the Critics' Choice Awards, not a peep about the hostages. I'm older than I should be, but I do remember the hostages in the late 1970s and how it was a drumbeat on the news. And yet there are still hostages who are held, and there are still Americans within that group, and yet it's barely mentioned on the news. So it's hard not to watch Screams Before Silence and think about all these issues and how they flood our senses and how they matter. But the bottom line is that someone did make this movie. It is powerful. It can be seen anywhere at this point, and it should be seen. And one last thought, it's only been a few days since the film's been released, but where are the critics? Now, I will say the Wrap.com reviewed the film, as they should, but I haven't seen many other film critics do the same. Will they? Will they ignore this movie? What are they waiting for? It's already been available. You don't need a ticket. You don't need a screening link. It's for free. It's just the click of a button and you can see the entire film. Now, again, as I said at the opening, I wasn't raring to see this movie. Who could possibly be eager to see something so profound and so upsetting? But we should. We all should. Screams Before Silence is a powerful documentary and a document to what happened on that day. And the fact that too many people have forgotten already, that's a stain on all of us.
Well, as you may know by now, AMC just slapped a trigger warning on Goodfellas. And no, it doesn't say, hey, this is a darn good mob movie, one of Scorsese's best, enjoy. No, it's the usual, there are stereotypes in this movie, this was made during a time, blah, I don't even want to repeat it, it is nauseating. But I did want to share a post that I just read on LinkedIn before I started if I turn on the mics here. It was talking about that particular trigger warning about Goodfellas. Now, this is from Freddie Rayo. He's someone in my LinkedIn network. I don't think I know him very well. He's listed as a TV professional and a cinephile from South Central Los Angeles. And this is what he had to say about that trigger warning. Cool. Now slap this advisory on Singleton's Boys in the Hood, or the Hughes brothers' Menace to Society, and Edward James Olmos's American Me. Though growing up in South Central, I can attest the last three examples are extremely accurate depictions of 90s to early 2000s street life in LA. I'm sure Scorsese did not witness and knows nothing about working-class Italian-American life, with him having grown up in Little Italy, New York, circa the 40s and 50s. Should we also put up trigger warnings before entering art museums because the nudity might offend the faint of heart? What a disservice to one of the greatest artists to ever sit behind the camera. I can add nothing to that. It's perfect. All right, let's answer that trivia question before we wrap things up here. Mel Gibson spoke with his actions, not his words, in the great movie, The Road Warrior. Dialogue? Not so much. But he did use this line twice in the film.
I'm just here for the gasoline.
Fill her up, Max. We got some roads to drive on. Well, that's it for the show this week. Thank you again to Radio America for having me as part of their great podcast lineup. And while I have your attention, I hope you'll drop by HollywoodInToto.com. Yes, it's another plug, but hey, I update that site 7 days a week. You've got news and reviews and commentary, everything covering the world from Hollywood. It is a right of center perspective, just like this podcast. And of course, we're woke free since 2014. I'll see you next week.